I'm Beverley Kane, 32, and after 3 years of trying, my husband Marcus and I were finally expecting our first child. We'd made the hardest decision of our lives, selling our dream home to move closer to my family for support during this precious time. The papers were signed, the move was scheduled, and our new chapter was about to begin. That's when my mother-in-law called with her wonderful news. She decided to move in with us to help with the baby. The problem? We'd already sold the house she thought she'd be living in, and what I discovered about her real motives would shatter everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones planning your downfall. If you've ever felt betrayed by those closest to you, you'll understand why I had to fight back. I still remember the exact moment I knew something was terribly wrong. It was the way Marcus's face went pale when he hung up the phone, his mother's voice still echoing in my mind. "I've decided to move in with you and Beverly to help with the baby," she'd announced with that tone of finality I'd learned to dread over the years. Marcus set his phone down on our kitchen counter, the same granite countertop we'd spent hours choosing when we first bought this house 4 years ago. Our dream home in the suburbs, with its perfect nursery upstairs and the garden where I'd imagined our children playing. The real estate contract sat in a manila folder nearby, already signed and notarized. The closing was scheduled for next Friday. "Mom doesn't know we sold the house," Marcus said quietly, running his hand through his dark hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of processing stress. "What do you mean she doesn't know?" I asked, though even as the words left my mouth, I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach. At 5 months pregnant, my emotions were already heightened, but this felt different. This felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet. I never told her. She kept talking about how excited she was to help with the baby, and I didn't want to disappoint her by explaining we were moving closer to your family instead of hers. I stared at him, my hand instinctively moving to my rounded belly. We'd discussed this decision for months. My mother lived just 20 minutes from the small town where we'd found our new house, a modest 2-bedroom place that was all we could afford after selling. His mother lived 3 hours away in the opposite direction. Marcus, we specifically chose to move closer to my family because my mom offered to help with childcare when I go back to work. Your mother has never even asked about our plans. I know. He paced to the living room window, looking out at the sold sign that had been planted in our front yard for 2 weeks now. But you know how she is. She gets these ideas in her head, and she just assumes. She assumes what exactly? I interrupted, feeling a familiar frustration building. That we'd completely uproot our carefully planned life to accommodate her whims. The thing about Patricia Kane, my mother-in-law, is that she had a remarkable ability to make her desires sound like generous offers. Over the years, I'd watched her manipulate situations with the precision of a chess master, always presenting herself as the selfless helper while somehow getting exactly what she wanted. "She sounded so excited," Marcus said, his voice carrying that pleading tone he used when he was trying to defend his mother's latest scheme. "She said she's been looking forward to being a hands-on grandmother." I picked up the real estate contract, the weight of it suddenly feeling immense. "Marcus, this house sold for $320,000. We're buying a house for $180,000. The difference is going into our savings for the baby and my maternity leave. We cannot afford to support your mother, and we certainly can't afford to break this contract." He turned from the window, his expression troubled. "Maybe we could find a way to make it work." "Make what work?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "We're moving in 3 weeks. The new house has 2 bedrooms, one for us, one for the baby." "Where exactly would your mother live?" "She could take the nursery temporarily, and we could set up the baby's room in our bedroom for the first few months." "No." The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. Marcus, we've been planning this move for 6 months. Your mother calls today, and suddenly you want to rearrange our entire lives. Something in his expression shifted, and I realized this wasn't just about logistics. This was about the pattern we'd fallen into throughout our marriage, where his mother's needs somehow always took precedence over our plans as a couple. She's getting older, Bev. She's lonely since Dad died, and she just wants to be close to her grandchild. Then she should have had this conversation with us 6 months ago, before we made irreversible decisions about our future. I watched him struggle with this, knowing that deep down he understood I was right. But Patricia Kane had raised her son to believe that questioning her decisions was somehow equivalent to betrayal. Even now, as a 34-year-old man with a wife and a baby on the way, Marcus still carried the weight of being her only child, her emotional support system, her constant source of validation. What if I call her back and explain about the house sale? He suggested. Maybe she'd understand and we can make plans for regular visits instead. I wanted to believe it would be that simple, but something in my gut told me this was just the beginning. Patricia Kane didn't make announcements like this without having already committed to them in her mind. And in my experience, when Patricia committed to something, she expected the world to bend around her decision. Yes, I said finally, call her back. But Marcus, we need to be united on this. We're not changing our plans. As he picked up his phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was about to become much more complicated than either of us anticipated. The real estate contract sat on the counter between us, a reminder of the future we'd carefully planned and the life we were trying to build together. I just had no idea how far his mother would go to tear it all down. To understand what happened next, you need to know about Patricia Kane and the delicate dance I'd been performing with her for the past 6 years. I pulled out our wedding album that evening, needing to remind myself of the signs I'd missed, the red flags I'd dismissed as quirks of a loving but overbearing mother. There she was in photo after photo, always positioned just slightly too close to Marcus, her hand on his arm, her smile just a little too bright, as if she were competing with me for his attention even on our wedding day. I'd been so naive then, so eager to be welcomed into their family that I'd interpreted her behavior as enthusiasm rather than possession. The first red flag had come during our engagement. Marcus and I had been planning a small ceremony at the local botanical garden, something intimate and meaningful to us. Patricia had other ideas. She'd already spoken to her pastor. She announced one Sunday dinner and reserved the church for a date that was 3 weeks after our planned wedding. When I gently suggested we preferred our original plan, she turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. I've been dreaming of walking my son down the aisle of the church where he was baptized, she had said, her voice trembling with emotion. But if that's not what you want, I'll understand. Marcus had looked at me with that same pleading expression I'd seen on the phone call, and I'd found myself nodding, agreeing to change our plans. The botanical garden, I told myself, would always be there. This was about family harmony, but it hadn't stopped with the wedding. When we bought our house, Patricia had opinions about everything from the neighborhood safety to the mortgage terms. She had somehow obtained copies of our loan documents. Marcus had given them to her for advice and spent a dinner party explaining to their extended family how we were overextending ourselves financially. The most telling photo in the album showed Christmas morning 2 years ago. Marcus was opening a gift from his mother, expensive watch that I knew we couldn't afford, but that Patricia had insisted he needed for his job. I was in the background, visibly pregnant with what would become our first miscarriage, holding a much smaller gift box. Inside had been a generic gift card to a store I'd never shopped at. She gives you things, but she gives him experiences, my friend Sarah had observed once. She's marking territory. I defended Patricia then, insisting she was just trying to be helpful. But looking at these photos now, I could see the pattern. And every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every milestone moment, Patricia positioned herself as the central figure in Marcus's life. With me as a supporting character at best, the dynamic had been especially clear during family dinners. Patricia would always sit next to Marcus, directing most of her conversation toward him, asking about his work, his thoughts, his plans. When I'd contribute to the conversation, she'd listen politely but always redirect back to Marcus. It was subtle enough that calling it out would have made me seem petty, but consistent enough that I'd begun to dread these gatherings. Marcus, for his part, had been raised to see this as normal. He was the golden child, the center of his mother's universe. After his father's death 5 years ago, she'd never remarried, never developed interests outside of her relationship with her son. Every decision in her life seemed to revolve around maintaining her position as the most important woman in Marcus's world. "She's just lonely," Marcus would say whenever I expressed concern about his mother's behavior. "She lost Dad, and now I'm all she has." But I'd begun to suspect it was more than loneliness. Patricia Kane had never learned to exist as an individual, separate from her role as a mother. The thought of Marcus building a life that didn't revolve around her seemed to genuinely terrify her. The pregnancy had made everything worse. From the moment we'd announced we were expecting, Patricia had inserted herself into every aspect of our preparations. She'd shown up at my doctor's appointments uninvited, claiming she happened to be in the neighborhood. She'd started buying baby items without consulting us, filling her spare bedroom with cribs and high chairs and toys, as if she were preparing for the baby to live with her. "I want to be involved," she'd said when I gently suggested she might want to check with us before making major purchases. "This is my first grandchild, and I've been waiting for this moment for years." The way she said "my first grandchild" always bothered me. Not your baby or the baby, but my grandchild. As if she had some inherent claim to our child that superseded our roles as parents. Marcus had grown up with this dynamic, so he didn't see how unusual it was. In his mind, his mother's overwhelming involvement was evidence of her love, not her need for control. He'd never learned to set boundaries with her because he'd never been taught that boundaries were necessary or healthy. Looking through that wedding album, I found the photo that now seemed most prophetic. It was taken during the father-daughter dance, except Marcus was dancing with his mother instead of me dancing with my father. She'd insisted on this modification to tradition, claiming it was important for her to have this moment with her son. I was standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching my husband dance with another woman on what was supposed to be our day. My father had been standing beside me, and I remember him leaning over to whisper, "That woman's not done raising her son yet." I'd laughed it off then, but his words echoed in my mind now. Patricia Kane had never allowed Marcus to fully grow up, to fully separate from her and become his own person. And now, with a grandchild on the way, she saw an opportunity to extend that control into the next generation. The phone call about moving in wasn't really about helping with the baby. I realized it was about ensuring that she remained the central figure in Marcus's life, even as our family expanded. She couldn't bear the thought of us building our new life closer to my family, of our child growing up with my mother as the primary grandparent influence. As I closed the wedding album, I understood that this wasn't going to be resolved with a simple phone call. Patricia Kane had spent years positioning herself as the most important person in Marcus's life, and she wasn't going to give up that position without a fight. The question was whether Marcus would finally learn to choose his wife and child over his mother's demands, and whether I was strong enough to force him to make that choice. Moving day arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that should have felt like a fresh start. Instead, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with pregnancy nausea. Marcus's call to his mother 3 weeks earlier had gone about as well as I'd expected, which is to say, not well at all. She cried, he had reported after hanging up. She said she'd already given notice at her apartment and made arrangements to leave her job. Without talking to us first? I'd asked, though I wasn't really surprised. She said she thought it was understood that we'd want her help. She's been telling everyone at church about how excited she is to move in with us. The manipulation was so obvious it made my teeth ache, but Marcus couldn't see it. Or maybe he could see it, but felt too guilty to call it what it was. Either way, we'd spent the past 3 weeks in a strange limbo, with Patricia calling daily to discuss her plans for helping with the baby. While we tried to figure out how to handle the situation, the moving truck had arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, and Marcus and I had been working with the crew to load our belongings when Patricia's silver Honda pulled into our driveway. She'd driven 3 hours to help, she announced, though she'd conveniently arrived after most of the heavy lifting was done. "Beverley, sweetheart, you shouldn't be doing all this work in your condition," she said, approaching me with that concerned smile I'd learned to distrust. She was wearing a floral blouse and pressed khakis, as if she were attending a garden party rather than helping with a move. "I'm just supervising," I replied, gesturing to the moving crew who were carefully wrapping our dining room table. "The professionals are handling the heavy items. Still, you need to be careful. At your age, pregnancy can be more complicated." She said it with such sweetness that it took a moment for the insult to register. At 32, I was hardly an elderly mother, but Patricia had a talent for delivering criticism disguised as concern. Marcus appeared at that moment, carrying a box of books. "Mom, I told you not to drive all this way. We have everything under control." "I wanted to see the house one last time," she said, her voice taking on that trembling quality that meant tears were coming. "So many memories here. Remember when we picked out the paint for your old room?" I watched Marcus's face soften, and I knew we were about to have a problem. Patricia hadn't helped us pick paint colors. We bought the house after we were married. But she had a way of inserting herself into memories, of making herself central to experiences she'd barely been part of. "It's a beautiful house," she continued, looking around with exaggerated wistfulness. "I just can't understand why you'd want to leave it, and to move so far away from family." "We're moving closer to family," I said, my patience wearing thin. "We're going to be 20 minutes from my mother." Patricia's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Of course, dear. I just meant your real family. The people who've known you your whole life." The casual dismissal of my family as somehow less real than hers was typical Patricia, but it stung nonetheless. Marcus opened his mouth to say something, but one of the movers interrupted, asking about the piano in the living room. As Marcus went to handle the logistics, Patricia moved closer to me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know. This move is stressful for you, but I want you to know that I've been looking at apartments near your new house. I found a lovely little place just a few blocks away. That way I can help with the baby without being underfoot." The casual way she announced this, as if it were a thoughtful solution rather than a continuation of her manipulation, left me momentarily speechless. She'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months, and she was presenting it as if she'd just thought of it. "Patricia, we never discussed." "Oh, I know you and Marcus like to make your own decisions," she interrupted, her tone suggesting this was somehow unreasonable. "But I thought it would be nice to have someone nearby who could help with middle of the night feedings or watch the baby when you need to run errands." Before I could respond, Marcus returned with a moving invoice that needed my signature. Patricia immediately shifted gears, becoming the helpful mother-in-law again, offering to bring everyone coffee and asking the movers if they needed anything. But I'd seen behind the mask for just a moment, and what I'd seen was a woman who had no intention of respecting our boundaries or our decisions. She'd already decided to move near us, already planned out her role in our lives, and she was simply informing us of her choices rather than asking for our input. The rest of the morning, passed in a blur of boxes and furniture and Patricia's constant commentary. She had opinions about how things should be packed, suggestions for better ways to organize the truck, and concerns about whether the movers were being careful enough with our belongings. In my day, we packed our own things, she told one of the movers, a patient man in his 50s who'd been doing this job for decades. We knew exactly where everything was. The moving crew, to their credit, remained professional, but I could see their subtle eye rolls and the way they began to avoid Patricia whenever possible. She had a gift for making people uncomfortable while maintaining plausible deniability about her behavior. The breaking point came when the movers began carrying items from the nursery. We'd spent months creating the perfect room for our baby Soft. Yellow walls, a white crib, a rocking chair that had been my grandmother's. Patricia watched the items being loaded with increasing agitation. "Are you sure you want to use that old rocking chair?" she asked, her voice sharp with disapproval. "I saw a beautiful new one at the furniture store, much more supportive for nursing mothers." "It's a family heirloom," I said, my hand moving protectively to my belly. "It's been in my family for 3 generations. Well, I suppose it's quaint," Patricia replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "I just worry about safety standards. These old pieces weren't built with modern safety requirements in mind." Marcus, who had been loading boxes into his car, looked up with attention. In our voices, "Mom, the rocking chair is fine." Beverly refinished it herself. "I'm sure she did her best," Patricia said, her smile never wavering. "I just want what's safest for my grandchild." The possessive language, "my grandchild," combined with the subtle criticism of my abilities as a mother-to-be pushed me past my breaking point. "Patricia, this is our baby, and these are our decisions. We appreciate your concern, but we don't need your approval for our choices." The silence that followed was deafening. The movers stopped what they were doing. Marcus looked stricken, and Patricia's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. "I see," she said, her voice ice cold. "I drive 3 hours to help my son move, and this is the thanks I get. I suppose I should have known that once you had Marcus's baby, you'd want to cut me out of your lives completely." The drama, the tears, the guilt, it was all so predictable, and yet it worked. Marcus immediately went to his mother's side, apologizing for my tone and assuring her that she was welcome in our lives. But as I watched this performance, I realized something important. Patricia Kane had just shown me exactly how she planned to operate in our new life. Every boundary we tried to set would be met with emotional manipulation. Every decision we made would be questioned and undermined. Every milestone in our child's life would become an opportunity for her to assert her authority. The moving truck pulled away an hour later, taking our belongings to our new life, but Patricia's parting words echoed in my mind as we drove away from our old house. "I'll see you soon, dear." After all, family is the most important thing. That wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. And I was beginning to understand that this move, which was supposed to give us space to build our own family, was about to become a battleground instead. The temporary housing situation was supposed to last 2 weeks, just long enough to handle the closing on our new house and get the utilities transferred. Instead, it became a 3-week nightmare that nearly broke our marriage and definitely broke our budget. The first problem was that Patricia had been right about one thing. I hadn't anticipated how exhausting the move would be in my second trimester. By the time we'd finished loading the truck at our old house, I was experiencing cramping that sent us to the emergency room instead of to our new home. The doctor had been concerned enough to recommend bed rest for a few days, which meant our carefully planned moving timeline went out the window. The second problem was that our new house needed more work than we'd realized. The home inspection had revealed some electrical issues that required immediate attention before we could move in safely. What was supposed to be a quick fix turned into a full electrical panel replacement that would take another week. So there we were, living in a cramped extended stay hotel room with our belongings in storage and our life in chaos. The daily rate was eating into our savings faster than I could calculate, and every day we stayed, there was a day we couldn't afford. Marcus was doing his best to handle the logistics, but he was also trying to work remotely from a hotel room while dealing with contractors and utility companies. I was supposed to be resting, but the stress of our situation was making that impossible. And then Patricia started calling. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" She'd ask, her voice dripping with concern. "This must be so hard on you, being displaced like this." At first I thought she was being supportive, but as the calls continued, I began to realize that Patricia was almost enjoying our crisis. She'd found a way to position herself as the solution to our problems, and she wasn't going to let the opportunity pass. "You know," she said during one of her daily check-ins, "I've been thinking about what you said on moving day, about not needing my help. I wonder if you might feel differently now." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Well, you're living in a hotel room, spending money you don't have, and you're supposed to be resting. Meanwhile, I have a perfectly good house with a spare bedroom that's just sitting empty. I could take care of you properly." The offer was tempting in the worst possible way. I was exhausted, stressed, and worried about the baby. The hotel room was cramped and uncomfortable, and the constant noise from the hallway was making it impossible to sleep. But accepting Patricia's help would mean giving her exactly what she wanted: control over our lives and our decisions. "That's very kind of you," I said carefully, "but we'll be in our new house soon. Will you, though?" she asked, and there was something in her tone that made me uneasy. These kinds of problems have a way of cascading. What if the electrical work reveals more issues? What if there are delays with the permits? You could be living in that hotel for months. The possibility hadn't occurred to me before, but now it loomed large in my mind. What if she was right? What if this temporary situation became permanent? We couldn't afford to stay in the hotel indefinitely, and we couldn't go back to our old house. The new owners had already moved in. "I'm sure it will work out," I said, more to convince myself than her. "Of course it will, dear. I just want you to know that you have options. Family looks out for family, after all." When Marcus returned from his daily trip to the new house, he looked defeated. "The electrical work is taking longer than expected," he reported. "The contractor found some issues with the wiring in the kitchen that need to be addressed before we can pass inspection." "How much longer?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Maybe another week, maybe 2. I felt the tears starting before I could stop them. The hormone surge of pregnancy combined with the stress of our situation was more than I could handle. "Marcus, we can't afford another 2 weeks in this hotel. We're already spending money we don't have." He sat down on the bed beside me, his own exhaustion evident. "I know. I'm trying to figure out our options." "Your mother called again today," I said. "She offered to let us stay with her." Marcus looked up with interest. "That's not a bad idea. Actually, it would save us money and you could rest properly." "Marcus, no, we can't do that. You know what will happen if we move in with her, even temporarily?" "What will happen?" he asked, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. "She take care of us. She help with the baby preparations. She make sure you're comfortable. She take over our lives," I said. "She make every decision for us, and she'll never let us leave. This is exactly what she wanted, Marcus. She wanted us to be dependent on her." "That's not fair," he said, standing up and pacing the small room. "She's offering to help us when we need it. Isn't that what family does? Real family helps without expecting control in return," I said. "Real family respects boundaries and supports your independence. Your mother doesn't want to help us, she wants to absorb us." We argued for another hour, our voices rising despite the thin hotel walls. Marcus couldn't understand why I was so resistant to his mother's help when we were clearly in crisis. I couldn't make him see that accepting her help would create a bigger crisis in the long run. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, Marcus left to get dinner. I was alone in the hotel room, surrounded by takeout containers and rumpled sheets, when my phone rang. It was Patricia. "Beverly, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. Marcus mentioned you two were having a difficult conversation about your living situation." The fact that Marcus had already called his mother to discuss our private argument felt like a betrayal. "We're working through it," I said carefully. "I'm sure you are. But I want you to know that there are no strings attached to my offer. I simply want to help my family during a difficult time. Patricia, I appreciate that, but I know you think I'm overstepping." She interrupted, her voice taking on that hurt tone that meant she was preparing to make this about her feelings rather than our needs. "But I lost my husband 5 years ago, and Marcus is all I have left. Now there's going to be a grandchild, and I just want to be part of that happiness." The guilt trip was expertly delivered, but I've been on the receiving end of Patricia's manipulation enough times to recognize it. "This isn't about excluding you from our lives," I said. "It's about us being able to make our own decisions as a couple." "Of course, dear. I would never interfere with your decisions. I just want to provide a comfortable place for you to rest while you're going through this difficult time." After she hung up, I sat in the hotel room and looked at the stack of receipts on the nightstand. Food, gas, hotel charges, every day was costing us money we didn't have. The cramped room, the constant noise, the uncertainty about when we'd be able to move into our new house. It was all taking a toll on my health and my relationship with Marcus. But I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than logic, that accepting Patricia's help would cost us something far more valuable than money. It would cost us our autonomy, our privacy, and our ability to start our marriage and our family on our own terms. The question was whether Marcus would understand that before it was too late. Because as I sat there in that hotel room, surrounded by the chaos of our displaced life, I realized that Patricia Kane had been planning this crisis all along. She'd known that selling our house would leave us vulnerable, and she'd positioned herself as the only solution to our problems. What I didn't know yet was just how far she'd go to ensure that we had no choice but to accept her help. The discovery happened by accident, the way most revelations do. I was using Marcus's laptop to research baby products while he was at the new house dealing with contractors, and I accidentally clicked on his recent browsing history instead of bookmarks. What I found made my blood run cold. Patricia Kane had been house hunting, not just browsing, actively searching for properties within a 5-mile radius of our new address. The search history showed dozens of real estate listings, all viewed within the past month, all focused on our new neighborhood. My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence. Ranch homes, condos, even mobile homes and senior communities. She'd looked at everything available. Some of the listings had been saved, others had been shared via email. There were property tax records, school district information, and local service directories. She'd been planning this move for weeks, maybe months. The phone call about moving in with us hadn't been a spontaneous decision driven by grandparent excitement. It had been a calculated move with backup plans and contingency strategies. I was still processing this information when Marcus returned from the house, covered in dust and looking frustrated. "The electrical work is going to take another week," he announced. "The contractor found some issues with the main line that require a city inspector." "Marcus, we need to talk," I said, turning the laptop toward him. "I found something on your browser history." He looked at the screen, and I watched his face go through several emotions: confusion, recognition, and then something that looked like guilt. "I can explain," he said. "You knew," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You knew she was planning to move here." "Not exactly," he said. sitting down across from me. She mentioned she was looking into options, but I didn't realize she's been researching our new neighborhood for weeks, Marcus. She's looked at dozens of properties. She's been planning this since before we even put our house on the market. He ran his hands through his hair, that familiar gesture of stress and avoidance. She said she was just exploring possibilities. She said she wanted to be prepared in case we needed help. Prepared for what? For us to fail? For our marriage to fall apart? For me to be unable to handle motherhood without her supervision? That's not what she meant, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what did she mean, Marcus? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your mother has been orchestrating this entire crisis. She wanted us to be dependent on her, and she's been planning it all along. I pulled up one of the saved listings, a small condo just 3 blocks from our new house. The listing had been viewed multiple times, and there were notes in the margins about proximity to schools and shopping centers. She's already put in applications, I said, my voice rising. Look at this email thread. She's been in contact with a real estate agent for 2 weeks. Marcus leaned forward to read the emails, and I watched his face change as he absorbed the information. His mother hadn't just been making plans, she'd been making commitments. She'd already submitted financial information, gotten pre-approved for a mortgage, and scheduled property viewings. She told me she was thinking about downsizing, he said weakly. She said her current place was too big since Dad died. And it didn't occur to you to mention this to me, your wife, the mother of your child. She asked me not to say anything until she'd made a decision. She said she didn't want to get everyone excited about something that might not happen. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. So you kept secrets from me to protect her feelings. You let me think her announcement was spontaneous when you knew she'd been planning this for weeks. I didn't know the extent of it, he said, gesturing to the laptop screen. I thought she was just exploring options. Marcus, she's looked at rental properties, mobile homes, condos, and single-family houses. She's researched property taxes, utility costs, and local services. This isn't exploring options, this is military-level reconnaissance. I continued scrolling through the history, finding more evidence of Patricia's elaborate planning. She'd researched pediatricians in our new area, looked up daycare centers, and even found information about local mommy groups and parenting classes. She's planning to run our lives, I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. She's not just moving near us, she's moving into our lives. She's going to be the grandmother who knows all the best doctors, the one who's already connected to all the local parenting resources, the one who's indispensable to our child's care. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, finally seeing the full scope of his mother's manipulation. Maybe she's just excited about being a grandmother, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Excited grandmothers buy baby clothes and children's books, I said. They don't conduct strategic research campaigns about their children's new neighborhoods. They don't make major life decisions without consulting the people they claim to want to help. I found another email thread, this one with a local moving company. Patricia had already gotten quotes for relocating her furniture and belongings. She'd scheduled tentative moving dates that aligned perfectly with our crisis at the hotel. She knew we were going to have problems with the house, I said, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. She knew we'd end up in temporary housing, and she timed her move to coincide with our vulnerability. That's impossible, Marcus said. She couldn't have known about the electrical issues. She didn't need to know the specific problems, I said. She just needed to know that buying a house is complicated, that there are always delays and unexpected costs. She's been through this before, Marcus. She knows how stressful moving can be, especially for a pregnant woman. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how perfectly Patricia had positioned herself. She'd waited until we were at our most vulnerable moment to present herself as the solution to our problems. She'd known that financial stress and physical discomfort would make us more likely to accept her help, more willing to compromise our boundaries. She's been manipulating us, I said. This whole crisis has been orchestrated to make us dependent on her. Marcus was staring at the laptop screen, scrolling through months of evidence of his mother's planning. I can't believe she would do this, he said, but his voice suggested he was beginning to believe it. Your mother is a smart woman, I said. She's not going to leave something this important to chance. She's been planning this takeover of our lives with the same precision she used to plan your childhood activities. I pulled up the last piece of evidence, a document that made my heart stop. It was a contract with a local real estate agent dated 3 weeks before our house sale was finalized. Patricia had committed to buying a property in our new neighborhood before we'd even announced our moving date. She knew exactly when we were closing on our house, I said. She knew our timeline, our budget, our plans, and she used that information to position herself as our savior. Marcus closed the laptop and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was the look of a man who was finally seeing his mother clearly for the first time in his adult life. What do we do now? He asked. Now we decide whether we're going to let her control our lives, I said. Because this isn't just about helping with the baby, Marcus. This is about whether we're going to be a family of 3, or a family of 3, or a family of supervisor. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of 6 years of marriage and the promise of parenthood. Outside our hotel window, the sun was setting on another day of our displaced life. Another day of Patricia Kane's carefully orchestrated crisis. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like Marcus and I were finally on the same side. The emergency room visit happened on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd discovered Patricia's elaborate moving plans. I woke up to sharp cramping and spotting that sent us racing to the hospital, both of us terrified that we were losing our baby. The triage nurse was efficient and kind, getting me into a room quickly and hooking me up to monitors that would track the baby's heartbeat. As I lay there listening to the steady rhythm of our child's heart, I felt Marcus squeeze my hand. Everything's going to be okay, he whispered, though his voice was tight with worry. The doctor who examined me was a middle-aged woman with gentle hands and a reassuring manner. The baby looks fine, she said after reviewing the ultrasound images. But your blood pressure is elevated and you're showing signs of significant stress. We've been having some housing issues, I explained. We've been living in a hotel for 3 weeks while our new house is being repaired. Dr. Martinez looked concerned. That level of displacement and uncertainty can be very hard on a pregnant woman. Are you getting adequate rest, proper nutrition? Before I could answer, there was a commotion outside our room. Raised voices, someone arguing with the nursing staff, and then Patricia Kane burst through the door as if she owned the place. Oh my goodness, Beverly, I came as soon as I heard, she announced, rushing to my bedside with an expression of exaggerated concern. Marcus called me from the car, and I've been so worried. I looked at Marcus in disbelief. You called your mother? I was scared, he said defensively. I thought she should know in case of what? I interrupted. In case something happened to your child. Shouldn't you have called my mother first? Patricia positioned herself between Marcus and me, taking my hand in both of hers. Now, this isn't the time for arguments. The important thing is that the baby is safe. Dr. Martinez cleared her throat. I'm sorry, but who are you? I'm Patricia Kane, the baby's grandmother, she said with that proprietary tone that made my skin crawl. I drove here as soon as I heard about the emergency. From 3 hours away, I said. How did you get here so fast? Patricia's expression flickered for just a moment. I happened to be in the area. I was looking at that lovely condo I mentioned, and when Marcus called, you were house hunting while we were having a medical emergency, I said, my voice rising despite the monitors attached to my chest. I was trying to find a solution to your housing problems. Patricia said, her voice taking on that martyred tone I'd learned to hate. I thought if I could secure a place nearby, I could help you through this difficult time. Dr. Martinez looked between us with the expression of someone who'd walked into a family drama she wanted no part of. I think we need to focus on the patient's health right now, she said firmly. Mrs. Kane, I need to discuss some concerns about stress levels and environmental factors. Of course, Patricia said, settling into the chair beside my bed as if she belonged there. I'm very concerned about Beverly's stress levels. This housing situation has been so hard on her. The housing situation isn't the only source of stress, I said pointedly. Dr. Martinez pulled up a chair, her attention focused on me. What I'm seeing here is classic signs of pregnancy-related stress response. Your blood pressure is elevated. You're showing signs of dehydration, and your body is responding to chronic anxiety. I've been trying to get her to rest more, Patricia interjected, but she's so stubborn about accepting help. I felt my blood pressure spike at her comment. I'm lying right here. You can talk to me directly, Patricia, please, Marcus said quietly, but his mother was already launching into her helpful suggestions. Doctor, I've been trying to convince them to let me help. I have a perfectly good house with a spare bedroom, and Beverly could rest properly there instead of living in that cramped hotel room. Dr. Martinez looked at me. Are you currently staying in temporary housing? Yes, but only until our new house is ready. It should be another week or 2. I see. And what's your support system like? Family nearby? My mother lives about 20 minutes from our new house, I said. That's one of the reasons we moved to that area. But she works full-time, Patricia added quickly. She wouldn't be available during the day to help with appointments or emergencies. Unlike Patricia, who apparently has unlimited time to insert herself into our lives, I said, my frustration boiling over. Dr. Martinez held up her hand. I can see there's some family tension here, but what I need to address is the impact on your pregnancy. Chronic stress can lead to complications, and what I'm seeing today suggests your body is struggling to cope. What kind of complications? Marcus asked, his voice tight with worry. Preterm labor, low birth weight. Pregnancy-induced hypertension stress isn't just uncomfortable, it's potentially dangerous for both mother and baby. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over us. I knew the hotel situation was stressful, but I hadn't realized it was putting our baby at risk. The good news is that we caught this early, Dr. Martinez continued, but I need you to make some immediate changes. More rest, better nutrition, and significantly reduced stress levels. See, Patricia said triumphantly, this is exactly why I've been offering to help. Beverly needs proper care, not hotel room living. What I need, I said, my voice shaking with emotion, is for people to stop making decisions about my life without consulting me. Dr. Martinez looked puzzled. I'm sorry, I don't understand. His mother has been planning to move near us for months without telling us, I explained. She's been house hunting, making financial commitments, and orchestrating this entire crisis so we'd be dependent on her help. Patricia's face flushed red. That's completely unfair, Beverly. I've been trying to be supportive. You've been trying to control us, I interrupted. You waited until we were at our most vulnerable moment to present yourself as our only option. Ladies, please, Dr. Martinez said firmly. This level of conflict is exactly what I'm concerned about. Whatever family issues you're dealing with, they need to be resolved in a way that prioritizes the health of this pregnancy. She turned to Marcus. Your wife needs a stable, low-stress environment. Can you provide that? Marcus looked between his mother and me, and for a moment I thought he might finally choose our family over his mother's demands. We're working on it, he said finally. Well, work faster, Dr. Martinez said bluntly. Because if I see Mrs. Kane back here with stress-related complications, we're going to be talking about bed rest and potentially early delivery. After she left, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. The monitors continued their study, beeping, a reminder that our baby was depending on us to create a safe environment for its development. I never wanted to cause stress, Patricia said finally, her voice small and hurt. I just wanted to help my family. Then help us by giving us space, I said. Help us by letting us make our own decisions about our lives and our child. But you're making the wrong decisions, she said, her mask slipping again. Living in that hotel, spending money you don't have, refusing help when it's offered, how is that good for the baby? It's temporary, Marcus said. The house will be ready soon and will be settled. And what happens when the baby comes? Patricia demanded. What happens when Beverly goes into labor and you're 3 hours away from any family support? What happens when she's home alone with a newborn while you're at work? The questions hung in the air, touching on fears I'd been trying not to think about. Patricia was right about one thing: having a baby was going to be challenging, and we would need support. But as I lay there in that hospital bed, surrounded by the evidence of what stress could do to my pregnancy, I realized that Patricia's kind of help came with a price I wasn't willing to pay. Her support wasn't offered freely, it came with strings attached, with expectations and control, and the gradual erosion of our autonomy as a couple. We'll figure it out, I said finally. Other couples manage to have babies without live-in grandparents. We'll manage too. Patricia stood up, her purse clutched tightly in her hands. I hope you're right, Beverly. For the baby's sake, I hope you're right. After she left, Marcus and I sat in silence for a long time. The discharge papers were processed, the medications prescribed, and the follow-up appointments scheduled. But I knew that the real healing for our marriage, our family, and our future was going to require something much more difficult than medical intervention. It was going to require Marcus to finally choose between his wife and his mother. And it was going to require me to find the strength to fight for our family, even when fighting felt like the most dangerous thing I could do. The hospital scare was the wake-up call I needed, but not in the way Patricia had intended. Instead of making me more willing to accept her help, it made me determined to understand exactly what we were dealing with. If stress was dangerous for my pregnancy, then I needed to eliminate the source of that stress, and that meant getting to the truth about Patricia Kane's financial situation and her real motivations. Started my investigation the day after we returned from the hospital. Marcus had gone back to dealing with contractors and inspectors, still trying to get us into our new house. I was supposed to be resting, but I couldn't rest while Patricia's lies and manipulations circled around us like vultures. The first thing I did was call my friend Sarah, who worked as a loan officer at a local bank. I couldn't ask her to violate anyone's privacy, but I could ask her to help me understand what kind of financial information would be required for someone Patricia's age to qualify for a mortgage. Most lenders are pretty cautious about lending to retirees, Sarah explained over coffee at a cafe near our hotel. They need to see significant savings, steady income from pensions or investments, or a cosigner. What if someone was lying about their financial situation? I asked. What if they were presenting themselves as more financially stable than they actually were? Sarah raised an eyebrow. That would be mortgage fraud, Bev. That's a federal crime. But it happens more often than you'd think, especially when people are desperate to qualify for loans. I thought about the emails I'd seen on Marcus's laptop. The confident way Patricia had discussed her pre-approval for a mortgage. Something about it hadn't felt right, but I couldn't put my finger on what was bothering me. How would someone get caught? I asked, usually during the verification process. Lenders check bank statements, employment records, tax returns. If someone's been lying about their income or assets, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly. After my conversation with Sarah, I decided to do some research of my own. I started with public records, property taxes, vehicle registrations, Anything that might give me insight into Patricia's actual financial situation. What I found was troubling. Patricia's house, which she'd owned with Marcus's father for 30 years, had been refinanced multiple times in the past 5 years. The mortgage balance was actually higher now than it had been when they'd first bought the place. For someone who claimed to be downsizing because the house was too big, she'd been borrowing against its equity at an alarming rate. The vehicle registration was even more interesting. Patricia drove a 2018 Honda Civic, a sensible car for a retiree, on a fixed income. But the registration showed it was leased, not owned, and the monthly payments were higher than what most people on Social Security could afford. I dug deeper, using online resources to piece together a picture of Patricia's financial life. What emerged was a woman living far beyond her means, someone who had been using credit and home equity to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. The real revelation came when I found the bankruptcy filing Patricia Kane had filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy protection 18 months ago, just 6 months after her husband's death. The filing showed debts of over $180,000, mostly credit cards and medical bills from her husband's final illness. She was on a court-ordered payment plan that required her to make monthly payments for the next 5 years. Someone in bankruptcy protection couldn't qualify for a new mortgage. Someone in bankruptcy protection certainly couldn't afford to move to our expensive new neighborhood and maintain her current lifestyle. Patricia Kane wasn't trying to help us out of generosity. She was trying to use us as a financial lifeline. Called Marcus immediately. "We need to talk," I said. "I found something about your mother that you need to see. Can it wait?" He asked. "I'm meeting with the electrical inspector in an hour, and if this goes well, we might be able to move in this weekend." "Marcus, your mother is bankrupt. She's been lying to us about her financial situation, and she can't actually afford to move near us." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What are you talking about?" I found the bankruptcy filing. "She's been in Chapter 13 protection for over a year. She owes more than $180,000 to creditors. The house hunting, the mortgage pre-approval, the generous offers to help, none of it is real." "That's impossible," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She said she was downsizing because she didn't need such a big house anymore." "She's downsizing because she's about to lose the house," I said. "The bankruptcy plan requires her to sell it and use the proceeds to pay down her debts." "She's not moving to help us, Marcus. She's moving because she has nowhere else to go." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "Send me whatever you found," he said finally. "I need to see this for myself." While I waited for Marcus to review the documents, I continued my research. The bankruptcy filing was public record, but it also referenced other court documents that painted an even clearer picture of Patricia's situation. She'd been fighting with insurance companies over her husband's medical bills. She'd been borrowing against her home equity to pay for his care. After he died, she'd been unable to keep up with the debt payments on her Social Security income alone. The timing of her interest in moving near us wasn't coincidental. It coincided almost exactly with the court-ordered deadline for her to sell her house and submit a payment plan to her creditors. Patricia Kane wasn't trying to insert herself into our lives out of love or grandparent excitement. She was trying to insert herself into our lives because she needed a place to live and people to support her financially. The phone calls about helping with the baby, the convenient appearance during our housing crisis, the perfectly timed offers of assistance, all of it had been a carefully orchestrated manipulation designed to make us feel obligated to rescue her from her financial problems. When Marcus called me back an hour later, his voice was different, older, somehow more tired. "I've been such an idiot," he said. "All those times she offered to help, all those generous gestures, she was positioning herself to ask us for help." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to call her," he said. I'm going to ask her directly about the bankruptcy, about the debt, about what she's really planning. Marcus, be careful. She's been lying to us for months. She's not going to suddenly start telling the truth because you asked nicely. Then what do you suggest? I thought about the stress-induced complications, about Dr. Martinez's warnings, about the baby growing inside me who deserved to be born into a stable, honest family environment. I suggest we protect ourselves, I said. I suggest we document everything, set clear boundaries, and make sure that when she tries to manipulate us again, and she will, we're ready for her. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I can't believe she would lie about something this big. Your mother has been lying about a lot of things, Marcus. The question is whether you're ready to stop enabling those lies and start protecting our family instead. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of revelations and the promise of confrontations to come. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we were finally seeing Patricia Kane clearly, and what we saw wasn't a generous grandmother eager to help with her baby. What we saw was a desperate woman who was willing to manipulate her own son to solve her financial problems. The question was whether Marcus was finally ready to see it too. The attorney's office was nothing like what I'd expected. Instead of the intimidating mahogany and leather setup I'd imagined, Jennifer Morrison's practice was housed in a converted Victorian home with comfortable furniture and family photos. On the walls, the business card she'd given me simply read family law and estate planning, but Sarah had recommended her specifically for dealing with what she called complex family dynamics. So tell me what's happening, Jennifer said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea and a legal pad. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with a kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen it all before. I laid out the whole story, the surprise announcement about moving in, the secret house hunting, the bankruptcy filing, and the pattern of manipulation that had characterized Patricia's relationship with Marcus for years. And now you're concerned about what happens when the baby arrives? Jennifer asked. I'm concerned about a lot of things, I said, but mostly I'm worried that she's going to claim some kind of rights to my child. She keeps calling it her grandchild and talking about how she's going to be involved in every aspect of the baby's life. Jennifer nodded, making notes on her. Tad, grandparent rights vary by state, but in general, they're much more limited than most people think. Grandparents can't just demand access to their grandchildren. They have to prove that their relationship with the child is important for the child's well-being. What if she moves near us anyway? What if she finds a way to insert herself into our lives despite the financial problems? That's where things get more complicated, Jennifer said. If she establishes residence nearby and begins providing regular childcare or financial support, she could potentially build a case for visitation rights later. The thought made my stomach clench. So the more we accept her help, the stronger her legal position becomes? Potentially, yes. Courts look at the established relationship between grandparent and grandchild. If she's been a primary caregiver or a significant presence in the child's life, that strengthens any future claim she might make. Jennifer leaned forward, her expression serious. But here's what I want you to understand. You have significant power in this situation. You're the parents. You get to decide who has access to your child and under what circumstances. The key is establishing clear boundaries early and documenting any violations of those boundaries. What kind of documentation? Everything. Save text messages, emails, voicemails. Keep records of any uninvited visits, any financial demands, any attempts to undermine your parenting decisions. If this situation escalates to the point where you need legal intervention, you'll want a clear paper trail. I thought about the browser history on Marcus's laptop, the bankruptcy documents I'd found, the pattern of lies and manipulation. What if she's been financially irresponsible? Does that affect her rights? It could, especially if she's asking You for financial support or if her financial problems create an unstable environment for the child. Courts consider the best interests of the child above all else. Jennifer pulled out a folder and handed me several documents. These are templates for what we call grandparent agreements. They're not legally binding, but they establish clear expectations about visits, gifts, involvement in childcare, and boundaries around parenting decisions. I skimmed the documents, feeling some of my anxiety ease as I read the clear, straightforward language. So this would protect us if she tries to overstep? It's a starting point. The real protection comes from consistency. You and your husband need to be united in your approach, and you need to enforce your boundaries every time they're tested. That's part of the problem, I admitted. Marcus has trouble saying no to his mother. He feels guilty about disappointing her. Jennifer nodded knowingly. That's incredibly common, especially with only children or in families where there's been emotional manipulation. The good news is that having a child often motivates parents to set boundaries they wouldn't set for themselves. What if she threatens legal action? What if she says she'll sue for grandparent rights? Let her threaten, Jennifer said firmly. Empty threats are a common manipulation tactic. If she actually files a petition for grandparent rights, you call me immediately and we'll respond appropriately. But most of the time, these threats are just attempts to scare you into compliance. She handed me her business card along with the document templates. My advice is to start with clear communication. Tell her exactly what your expectations are regarding her role in your family's life. Be specific about boundaries, how often you're comfortable with visits, what kind of advance notice you expect, what topics are off limits for discussion. And if she doesn't respect those boundaries, then you enforce consequences. Limited contact, supervised visits, only whatever it takes to protect your family's well-being. You're not obligated to maintain a relationship that's harmful to you or your child, even if it's with a grandparent. As I left Jennifer's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, a sense of control over my own life. The legal framework wasn't complicated, and the protections available to parents were stronger than I'd realized. But more importantly, I now understood that Patricia's power over our family was largely illusory. Her threats, her manipulation, her claims about what she was entitled to as a grandmother, all of it depended on Marcus and me accepting her version of reality. The law was on our side. Common sense was on our side. The only question was whether Marcus was ready to use the tools available to protect our family. I drove back to the hotel with a plan forming in my mind. It was time to stop reacting to Patricia's manipulation and start taking control of the situation. It was time to document everything, establish clear boundaries, and prepare for the confrontation that was coming, whether we wanted it or not. Because one thing Jennifer had made clear, this situation wasn't going to resolve itself. Patricia, Kane wasn't going to suddenly develop respect for our autonomy or our decisions. If we wanted to protect our family, we were going to have to fight for it, And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt ready for that fight. The confrontation happened 2 days after my meeting with the attorney. Marcus had finally called his mother to discuss what I'd discovered, but their conversation had been predictably unproductive. Patricia had deflected, denied, and ultimately hung up on him when he'd pressed her for honest answers about her financial situation. That's when she decided to show up at our hotel. I was resting in bed, trying to follow Dr. Martinez's orders, when I heard the familiar sound of Patricia's voice in the hallway. She was arguing with someone, probably the front desk staff, about getting access to her room. "I'm his mother," I heard her say. "This is a family emergency." Marcus had gone to the new house to meet with the final inspector, so I was alone when Patricia knocked on our door. I considered not answering, but I knew she wouldn't leave until she'd said whatever she'd driven 3 hours to say. I opened the door to find Patricia standing in the hallway with 2 large suitcases and an expression of righteous indignation. "Beverly, we need to talk," she announced, pushing past me into the room without waiting for an invitation. "Patricia, this isn't a good time," I said, but she was already making herself comfortable, sitting down in the room's single chair as if she belonged there. "It's never a good time with you, is it?" she said, her voice sharp with frustration. "First you refuse my help, then you turn my son against me with your paranoid accusations." "They're not accusations," I said, remaining standing. "They're facts. I have the bankruptcy documents, Patricia. I know about the debt, the payment plan, the deadline to sell your house." Her face flushed red, but she didn't deny it. "So what if I've had some financial difficulties? That doesn't change the fact that I want to help my family." "You don't want to help us," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "You want us to help you. You need a place to live and people to support you financially. So you've been manipulating us into feeling obligated to rescue you." Patricia stood up abruptly, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "How dare you? I've spent 34 years raising that boy, sacrificing my own needs for his happiness, and this is how I'm repaid. With suspicion and accusations. From a woman who's known him for 6 years. A woman who's married to him," I corrected. "A woman who's carrying his child. A woman who has every right to protect her family from manipulation." "Your family?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "Marcus was my family long before you came along, and he'll be my family long after you're gone. Blood is thicker than water, Beverly." The threat was subtle but unmistakable, and it triggered something protective and fierce inside me. "Is that what you think this is about? Some kind of competition for Marcus's loyalty, isn't it?" Patricia moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "You've been trying to turn him against me since the day you met him. You moved him away from his family, convinced him to sell his house, and now you're having his baby so you can cut me out of his life completely." The projection was stunning in its completeness. Every manipulation she'd attempted, every boundary she'd violated, every lie she'd told, she was attributing all of it to me. "Patricia, I never asked Marcus to choose between us," I said. "But you've been forcing that choice for 6 years. Every holiday, every major decision, every milestone in our relationship, you've made it about your needs versus our needs as a couple." "Because I love him," she said, tears starting to flow. "Because I know what's best for him better than some woman he met in college." "No," I said firmly, "because you can't let go. Because you can't accept that Marcus is an adult with his own life and his own family." Patricia sat back down, pulling tissues from her purse with practiced efficiency. "I never wanted things to be this way between us," she said, switching tactics from anger to wounded vulnerability. "I tried to be welcoming, to be supportive of your marriage." "You tried to control our marriage," I corrected. "You tried to make yourself indispensable so we'd never be able to build an independent life together." "That's not true," she protested. But even as she said it, she was looking around our cramped hotel room with satisfaction. "Look at this place, Beverly. Look at what your independence has gotten you. Living in a hotel room, stressed to the point of medical emergencies, spending money you don't have on temporary housing when I offered you a perfectly good home. A home that comes with strings attached," I said. "A home where you'd have a vote in every decision we make about our child." "I have experience raising children," Patricia said. "I successfully raised Marcus to be a good man with good values. Don't you think that experience might be valuable?" "Your experience is 30 years out of date," I said. "And more importantly, this isn't your child to raise. This is our child, mine and Marcus's. You'll be the grandmother, not the parent." Patricia's expression hardened again. "We'll see about that," she said, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that grandparents have rights," she said, standing up and smoothing her clothes. "It means that when Marcus realizes how hard it is to raise a child without support, he'll remember who really cares about his family. Are you threatening legal action? I asked, thinking about my conversation with Jennifer Morrison. I'm stating facts, Patricia said. I'm going to be in my grandchild's life, Beverly. You can make that easy or you can make it difficult, but you can't prevent it. She moved toward her suitcases, and I realized she'd been planning to stay whether we invited her or not. What are you doing? I'm moving my things in, she said matter-of-factly. Since you insist on staying in this terrible place instead of accepting my help, I'll stay here too. I can protect my family just as well from a hotel room as from anywhere else. The audacity took my breath away. Patricia, you can't just move into our hotel room. Watch me, she said, opening the first suitcase and beginning to unpack. I already spoke to the front desk. They're setting up a cot. I stood there watching her methodically arrange her belongings in our space, claiming territory with the same confidence she'd shown in claiming everything else related to our lives. This wasn't just manipulation anymore, this was invasion. That's when I heard Marcus's key in the door. He walked in to find his mother hanging clothes in her closet and his wife standing frozen in the middle of the room. Mom, what are you doing? Here, he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew this wasn't good news. I'm protecting my family, Patricia said, not looking up from her unpacking. Since you two insist on living in conditions that are dangerous for the baby, I'm staying here to make sure nothing happens. Marcus looked at me, and I saw something in his expression that I'd been waiting to see for 6 years. Not confusion or guilt or the desire to make everyone happy. I saw clarity. I saw a man who finally understood that his mother wasn't trying to help his family, she was trying to control it. Mom, he said quietly, you need to leave. Patricia froze in the middle of hanging a dress. What did you say? I said you need to leave. Right now. Take your things and go home. The silence that followed was electric with tension. 3 adults in a cramped hotel room. A lifetime of manipulation and enabling and boundary violations hanging in the air between us. And for the first time since I'd known her, Patricia Kane had no response. She'd finally pushed too far, demanded too much, revealed too clearly what she really wanted. Marcus had finally chosen his wife and child over his mother's needs. Question was whether Patricia would accept that choice, or whether this confrontation was just the beginning of a much uglier fight. Patricia didn't leave quietly. She packed her suitcases with deliberate slowness, muttering under her breath about ingratitude and manipulation, making sure we understood that this was a grave injustice being perpetrated against a loving mother and grandmother. But she did leave, and within an hour of her departure, my phone started buzzing with text messages from Marcus's extended family. The first was from his Aunt Linda. Marcus, your mother is very upset. What happened? Then his cousin Jennifer. Patricia is crying. She says you threw her out of your hotel room. Is everything okay? Uncle Bill chimed in. Family should stick together, especially during difficult times. Whatever's going on, I'm sure you can work it out. And finally, the group text that included the entire Kane family meeting Sunday at Linda's house. We need to discuss the situation with Patricia and get everyone on the same page. Marcus stared at his phone with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. She's telling everyone her version of the story, he said. What version is that? I asked, though I could guess. He scrolled through the messages, his face growing darker with each one. That you've turned me against her. That you're trying to keep her away from her grandchild. That we threw her out when she was just trying to help. Are you surprised? I guess I shouldn't be, he said, sinking onto the bed. But I didn't expect her to involve the whole family this quickly. The manipulation was masterful in its efficiency. By reaching out to the entire extended family, Patricia had accomplished several things at once. She'd positioned herself as the victim, generated sympathy and support for her cause, and created pressure on Marcus to reconcile with her or face family disapproval. So, what do you want to do? I asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, still, reading through the increasingly concerned messages from his relatives. I want to tell them the truth, he said finally. The whole truth? The bankruptcy, the manipulation, the lies about moving to help us when she really needs our help, all of it. I felt a surge of relief and pride. This was the Marcus I'd fallen, in love with, thoughtful, honest, willing to do the right thing even when it was difficult. He started typing responses to the group text, explaining the real situation in clear, factual terms. He attached screenshots of the bankruptcy filing, the house hunting browser history, and some of Patricia's more revealing text messages about her expectations for our living arrangements. The responses came quickly, but they weren't what either of us expected. Aunt Linda. Patricia's been struggling since Robert died. Maybe she didn't handle this perfectly, but she needs family support right now. Cousin Jennifer. Everyone makes mistakes with money. That doesn't mean she doesn't love you and want to help with the baby. Uncle Bill. This seems like something that should be worked out privately, not aired in front of the whole family. And then the message that made Marcus's face go pale. Marcus, this is your cousin David. I've been helping Mom with her finances since Dad died. She's been planning to move near you because she literally has nowhere else to go. The bankruptcy plan requires her to sell the house, and she can't afford to live on her own anymore. She was hoping you'd let her move in and help with expenses, but she was too proud to ask directly. She's not trying to manipulate you, she's desperate. The revelation hit like a cold slap. Patricia's manipulation had been even more calculated than we'd realized. She hadn't just been planning to insert herself into our lives, she'd been planning to make us financially responsible for her. Jesus, Marcus whispered, reading David's message. She was going to make us support her financially while pretending it was about helping us. My phone buzzed with a direct message from David. Beverly, I know this is awkward, but Mom is really in trouble. The medical bills from Dad's illness wiped out their savings, and she's been trying to figure out how to survive on just Social Security. Moving in with you guys seemed like the only solution. I showed the message to Marcus, watching his expression. Cycle through confusion, anger, and something that looked like grief. She lied to us about everything, he said. The whole story about wanting to help with the baby, about being excited to be a grandmother, it was all just cover for the fact that she needs us to take care of her. What are you going to say to David? I asked. Marcus thought for a moment, then started typing. I understand that Mom is in a difficult financial situation, but that doesn't excuse the lies and manipulation. If she needs help, she should have asked honestly instead of trying to trick us into providing it. David's response was immediate. She was embarrassed about the bankruptcy. She didn't want you to see her as a burden, so instead she wanted us to see her as a controlling grandmother who couldn't respect our boundaries, I typed back. That was preferable to honesty. The group text had gone quiet, but I could see that people were still reading the messages. The family dynamics were shifting in real time as everyone processed the information Marcus had shared. Finally, Aunt Linda broke the silence. I had no idea about the bankruptcy. Patricia never told us how bad things were financially. Uncle, Bill added, she should have been honest with all of us. We could have helped figure out a solution that didn't involve deceiving you two. But then came the message that revealed the deeper family dysfunction. This is Patricia. David gave me his phone. I can't believe my own son would share private family business with everyone like this. I raised you better than this, Marcus. The guilt trip was immediate and predictable, but this time Marcus didn't take the bait. Instead, he typed back, Mom, you involved the whole family when you called them crying about being mistreated. I'm just making sure they have the full story. The full story is that I love my son and want to be part of my grandchild's life. And his wife has convinced him that I'm some kind of villain for that. I watched Marcus's jaw clench as he read his mother's response. This was the pattern that had dominated their relationship for decades. Patricia would create a crisis, manipulate the situation to her advantage, and then play the victim when anyone called her out on her behavior. "Mom," Marcus typed, "you filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago and never told me. You've been house hunting your new home for months without discussing it with us. You made financial commitments and life-changing decisions based on assumptions about our willingness to support you. None of that is about loving me or wanting to be part of your grandchild's life. It's about solving your problems at our expense." The response came from David's phone again. "She's crying now. Are you happy?" "No," Marcus typed back. "I'm not happy about any of this. But I can't base major life decisions on Mom's emotional reactions anymore. I have a wife and a baby to consider." That's when the family meeting text came from Aunt Linda. "Sunday, 2 p.m., my house. We need to figure out how to handle this situation like adults." I looked at Marcus. "Do you want to go?" "I don't know," he said. "Part of me thinks we should skip it entirely, but another part of me thinks this might be our chance to set clear boundaries with the whole family, not just with Mom." Before we could decide, another message came through, this time from Patricia herself using David's phone. "If you don't come to the family meeting, I'll know that Beverly has completely turned you against your own family. I'll know that I've lost my son forever." The manipulation was so obvious it was almost comedic, but I could see it still affected Marcus. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight, and Patricia knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. "That's not fair," he typed back. "This isn't about Beverly turning me against anyone. This is about you refusing to respect our boundaries and our decisions as a couple." "What boundaries?" came the response. "The boundary that says I can't love my grandchild. The boundary that says I can't want to help my family. The boundary that says I should just disappear and pretend I don't exist." I took Marcus's phone and typed, "Patricia, this is Beverly. The boundaries are simple. No line about your financial situation, no making major life decisions without consulting us, no moving near us without our agreement, and no emotional manipulation when we make decisions you don't like. Those aren't unreasonable expectations." The response was immediate and harsh. "I don't take orders from you about my relationship with my son. And I don't take orders from you about my marriage or my child." I typed back. "We're the parents. We make the decisions. You can be part of our lives on our terms, or you can choose not to be part of our lives at all." The group text exploded with responses. Some family members supported Patricia, others supported us, and a few tried to play peacemaker. But through it all, I noticed something important. Marcus wasn't backing down. He wasn't trying to smooth things over or make everyone happy. He was standing firm on our boundaries, even when it meant disappointing people he cared about. "I think we should go to the family meeting," he said finally. "Not to negotiate with Mom, but to make it clear to everyone what our position is and what our boundaries are. If we don't show up, she control the narrative completely." I thought about Jennifer Morrison's advice about documentation and clear communication. "Okay," I said, "but we go with a plan. We state our position clearly. We don't get drawn into arguments, and we leave if the conversation becomes abusive." "Agreed," Marcus said, and Bev, "Thank you." "For what?" "For making me see what was really happening. For giving me permission to put our family first. I know this is hard for you, being pregnant and dealing with all this stress." I squeezed his hand. "It's hard for both of us. But it's necessary. Our baby deserves to grow up in a family where boundaries are respected and manipulation isn't tolerated." As I watched Marcus compose a message to the family group, confirming our attendance at Sunday's meeting, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not that the meeting would resolve everything, but that Marcus and I were finally united in protecting our family. Patricia Kane had spent 6 years manipulating her son and undermining our marriage. But her desperate overreach had finally revealed her true motives to everyone, including Marcus himself. Sunday's family meeting wasn't going to be pleasant, but it was going to be the beginning of the end of Patricia's control over our lives. The 20-week ultrasound was scheduled for Friday morning, 3 days before the family meeting. We'd been looking forward to this appointment for weeks. It was when we'd finally learn whether we were having a boy or a girl, and see our baby in enough detail to start imagining what he or she might look like. What I didn't expect was for Patricia to somehow know about the appointment and show up at the doctor's office. Marcus and I were sitting in the waiting room, holding hands and trying to contain our excitement when Patricia walked through the door as if she belonged there. She was wearing her best dress and carrying a small gift bag, looking for all the world like an invited grandmother-to-be. "I hope I'm not late," she announced, settling into the chair beside Marcus. "I drove down this morning specifically for this appointment." "Mom, how did you even know about this?" Marcus asked, though his tone was more tired than surprised. "You mentioned it in passing last month," she said, which I knew was a lie. "I've been looking forward to seeing my grandchild for the first time." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Patricia, this is a private medical appointment. You weren't invited." "Of course I was invited," she said with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm the grandmother." "Don't most grandmothers come to these appointments?" "Not without being asked," I said, but before I could say more, the nurse called our names. "Kane family? Dr. Patterson is ready for you." Patricia stood up immediately as if she were part of the Kane family being called. I looked at Marcus, hoping he would handle this, but he seemed frozen by the awkwardness of the situation. "Patricia," I said firmly, "you need to wait here. This is a medical appointment for Marcus and me." "Don't be silly, dear," she said already, walking toward the nurse. "I'm family." The nurse looked confused, clearly unsure about the family dynamics playing out in front of her. "How many people will be joining us today?" she asked diplomatically. "2, I said at the same time Patricia said 3. Marcus finally found his voice. "Mom, you need to stay in the waiting room. This is Beverley's medical appointment." "But I want to see the ultrasound," Patricia said, her voice taking on that whining quality that meant tears were coming. "I want to see my grandchild for the first time." "You can see the pictures afterward," I said, feeling increasingly claustrophobic, as Patricia positioned herself between Marcus and me. "But the actual appointment is private." "I don't understand why you're being so selfish about this," Patricia said, loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. "Most women would be thrilled to have their mother-in-law be so excited about their baby." The nurse, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding in her workplace, made an executive decision. "I think we'll start with just the parents today," she said diplomatically. "Perhaps the grandmother can join us for the final few minutes to see the baby, if that's acceptable to everyone." It wasn't acceptable to me, but I was too exhausted to keep fighting in front of a room full of strangers. I nodded reluctantly, and Patricia settled back into her chair with a triumphant smile. The ultrasound itself was magical, despite the tension. Our baby was active and healthy, measuring exactly on schedule. The technician pointed out tiny hands and feet, the curve of the spine, the chambers of the heart beating strong and steady. "Do you want to know the sex?" Dr. Patterson asked Marcus, and I looked at each other and nodded. We'd decided weeks ago that we wanted to know, wanted to start planning and dreaming about our specific child rather than an abstract baby. "Congratulations," Dr. Patterson said with a smile. "You're having a little girl?" The joy that flooded through me was immediate and overwhelming. A daughter. Marcus squeezed my hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Our little girl, growing strong and healthy inside me. That's when the nurse, true to her word, opened the door to let Patricia join us for the final few minutes of the appointment. "Oh my goodness," Patricia exclaimed, rushing to the ultrasound monitor. "She's beautiful." She looks just like Marcus did at this stage. The presumption in her statement, claiming to see family resemblance in a 20-week ultrasound image, was absurd, but it was also revealing. In Patricia's mind, this baby was already more Kane than mine, already more connected to her family than to me. "What are you going to name her?" Patricia asked, positioning herself at the head of my bed as if she were the primary support person rather than Marcus. "We haven't decided yet," I said, uncomfortable with how physically close she was getting to me during this intimate moment. "Have some suggestions," Patricia said, pulling a small notebook from her purse. "I've been keeping a list of family names that would be perfect for a little girl." She began reading from her list names of Marcus's great-grandmothers and aunts, family names that had special meaning to the Kane family, but no connection to my family at all. "What about Emma?" I suggested, thinking of my grandmother who had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 10. "Emma's a bit common, don't you think?" Patricia said dismissively. "Something like Margaret or Catherine would be more elegant, more substantial." Dr. Patterson was printing ultrasound pictures, clearly trying to wrap up the appointment and escape the family tension. "These are beautiful images," she said, handing us a strip of photos. "Baby looks perfect." Patricia immediately reached for the pictures. "Oh, I need copies of these for the family. Everyone's going to want to see their new granddaughter." "Well, make copies," Marcus said, but Patricia had already taken the pictures and put them in her purse. "I'll take care of it," she said. "I know exactly who needs to see these." As we left the doctor's office, Patricia walking between Marcus and me, as if she were an equal partner in this pregnancy, I felt the familiar sensation of my autonomy being stripped away piece by piece. The gift bag she'd brought contained a pink dress in newborn size, along with a card that read, "To my precious granddaughter, from Grandma Patricia, who loves you so much already." "I bought this the day I found out about the pregnancy," she said proudly. "I had a feeling it was going to be a girl." The dress was beautiful, but it was also a statement of ownership. Patricia was claiming our daughter before she was even born, establishing herself as the primary grandmother, the one with the emotional connection and the family history. "Thank you," I said politely, though what I really wanted to do was throw the dress in the nearest trash can. "I can't wait to hold her," Patricia continued as we walked to our cars. "I've been thinking about all the things I want to teach her, all the family stories I want to share. She's going to be such a special little girl." As Patricia drove away with our ultrasound pictures in her purse and plans for our daughter's future in her head, I realized that the problem wasn't just about Patricia's financial desperation or her need for housing. The problem was deeper and more fundamental than that. Patricia Kane believed that she had an inherent right to her child. She believed that being a grandmother gave her equal say in her daughter's upbringing, equal claim to her affection, equal authority in decisions about her care. The family meeting on Sunday wasn't just about setting boundaries around Patricia's living situation. It was about establishing, once and for all, that Marcus and I were our daughter's parents, and that no one else, not even a grandmother, had the right to override our decisions or insert themselves into our family without invitation. Our little girl deserved better than to grow up in the middle of a power struggle between her parents and her grandmother. She deserved to be raised by people who respected each other's roles and boundaries. It was time to make sure that happened. Whatever the cost to family harmony. The discovery came by accident, like so many revelations in this nightmare. David, Patricia's nephew, who had been helping with her finances, called Marcus on Saturday morning with what he thought was good news. "I found a solution for Aunt Patricia's housing situation," he said, his voice bright with relief. "There's a senior living community about an hour from you guys that has income-based apartments. She could afford it on her Social Security, and she'd still be close enough to visit the baby regularly." "That sounds promising," Marcus said, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. What's the catch? Well, there's a waiting list, but I have a contact there who thinks he can get her moved up if she applies soon. The thing is, she'd need to show proof of steady income and provide references. That's where I discovered something weird about her finances. My stomach dropped. Weird how? She's been receiving life insurance payments that she never mentioned, to me or to the bankruptcy court. When Dad died, there were two policies, one that went through probate and one that didn't. She's been getting monthly payments from the second policy for over a year. Marcus looked confused. How much are we talking about? About $1,500 a month. Combined with her Social Security, she's actually got enough income to live independently. She doesn't need to move in with you guys at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia had been crying poverty, claiming she needed our financial support, manipulating us into feeling guilty about her housing situation, all while receiving enough money to support herself comfortably. David, I said carefully, are you sure about this? The bankruptcy documents I found showed her income as just Social Security. That's what I'm saying. She never disclosed the life insurance income to the bankruptcy court. I only found out about it because I was helping her organize her papers for the senior living application and I saw the bank statements. Marcus was staring at the phone with an expression of complete shock. So she's been lying about her financial situation this entire time? It looks that way. And honestly, Marcus, I think you need to know something else. The house hunting near your new place. She's been using the life insurance money to put deposits down on rental properties. She's committed to at least 3 different places, telling each landlord that she's the only applicant they're considering. I felt sick. She's been planning this move regardless of whether we wanted her there. It gets worse, David continued. I found paperwork where she listed you as her emergency contact and financial guarantor for a lease application. She forged your signature on the financial responsibility forms. Marcus stood up so abruptly that he knocked over his coffee cup. She did what? She committed fraud, Marcus. She used your name and credit information without your permission to guarantee a lease on an apartment 2 miles from your new house. The weight of what David was telling us settled over the hotel room like a heavy blanket. Patricia hadn't just been manipulating us emotionally, she'd been committing crimes in our name to force her way into our lives. Do you have copies of these documents? I asked. I took pictures with my phone before confronting her about them. She told me it was just a misunderstanding, that she was sure you'd want to help her with the application process. David, she could have destroyed our credit, Marcus said, his voice shaking with anger. If she'd defaulted on that lease, we'd have been legally responsible for the debt. I know. That's why I'm calling. I think you need to contact the apartment complex and explain that your signature was forged. I also think you might want to check your credit report to make sure she hasn't done anything else. After David hung up, Marcus and I sat in stunned silence. Every time we thought we understood the scope of Patricia's manipulation, we discovered another layer of deception. We need to call the attorney, I said finally. We need to call the police, Marcus replied. Forging my signature on legal documents is identity theft. But even as he said it, I could see the conflict in his eyes. This was his mother, the woman who had raised him, and the thought of having her arrested was devastating despite everything she'd done. Let's call Jennifer first, I said. Let's understand our legal options before we decide how to proceed. Jennifer. Morrison's weekend emergency line connected us directly to her, and she listened to our story with the kind of professional calm that suggested she'd heard similar tales before. The signature forgery is definitely identity theft, she confirmed, but the bigger issue is the pattern of financial fraud. If she's been hiding income from the bankruptcy court while claiming poverty to manipulate you, that's bankruptcy fraud, which is a federal crime. What should we do? Marcus asked. First, contact the apartment complex immediately and explain that the signature was forged. Get a written confirmation that the lease application has been withdrawn and that you're not financially responsible for anything. Second, pull your credit reports and check for any other unauthorized activity. Third, document everything David told you and get copies of any paperwork he has. And then you decide whether you want to press charges. I know that's a difficult decision when it's family, but you need to understand that if you don't take legal action, Patricia will likely interpret that as permission to continue this behavior. After the call, Marcus sat on the bed with his head in his hands. I can't believe she would forge my signature. I can't believe she would put our credit at risk. She's desperate, I said. Desperate people do desperate things. But this goes beyond desperation. This is criminal behavior. This is my mother committing crimes to force her way into our lives. I pulled up the contact information for the apartment complex David had mentioned. Marcus, we need to handle this now before the situation gets worse. The conversation with the apartment manager was as uncomfortable as I'd expected. Yes, they had a lease application from Patricia Kane. Yes, Marcus Kane was listed as a financial guarantor. Yes, they'd been planning to call him for income verification early next week. I need to be very clear, Marcus told the manager. I did not sign those documents. My signature was forged. I am not agreeing to be financially responsible for Miss Kane's lease. The manager was understanding but firm about their procedures. They would need a written statement declaring the signature forgery, and they would likely have to report the incident to their legal department. Will you be pressing charges against Miss Kane? She asked. Marcus looked at me, and I saw the moment. When he made his decision, we're considering all our legal options, he said after we hung up. Marcus pulled his laptop over and began typing an email to the extended family group chat. What are you doing? I asked. I'm telling them what we just found out about the hidden income, the forged signatures, the multiple lease applications. They need to know what kind of person they're defending. I watched him type out the facts in clear, unemotional language. The life insurance income Patricia had hidden, the signature forgery, the pattern of lies about her financial situation. Are you sure you want to send this before tomorrow's family meeting? I asked. Marcus paused, his finger hovering over the send button. If I don't send it now, she'll have all night to come up with explanations and excuses. She'll find a way to make this about her grief or her confusion or cruelty in abandoning her. He hit send. The responses came immediately, but they were different from the previous family discussion. There was no defending Patricia's behavior this time. No suggesting we work things out or be more understanding. Aunt Linda, I had no idea. She was receiving life insurance money. She told me she was living on just Social Security. Uncle Bill, forging signatures is serious business. That's not something you do accidentally. Cousin Jennifer, if she's been lying about money, what else has she been lying about? And then silence from Patricia's phone. For the first time in this entire ordeal, she had no response, no explanation, no way to turn herself into the victim, because what do you say when you've been caught committing fraud against your own son? The family meeting tomorrow was going to be very different from what anyone had expected. This wasn't going to be about hurt feelings or misunderstandings or the need for better communication. This was going to be about consequences. I spent Sunday morning writing what would be my final letter to Patricia Kane, not an email or a text that could be forwarded or screenshot, but a handwritten letter that would make my position absolutely clear. Marcus found me at the small desk in our hotel room, carefully choosing each word. What are you writing? He asked. A letter to your mother. I want to put everything in writing, our boundaries, our expectations, and the consequences if she continues to violate them. I'd learned from Jennifer Morrison that documentation was crucial. but I'd also learned something about myself over the past weeks. I was tired of reacting to Patricia's manipulation. I was ready to take control of the situation and set the terms for any future relationship. Dear Patricia, I read aloud to Marcus. I am writing to clarify the boundaries for your involvement in our family's life, particularly regarding our daughter who is due in 4 months. First, any relationship you have with our child will be entirely at our discretion. We are her parents, and we will determine when, where, and how often visits occur. There are no grandparent rights that supersede our authority as parents. Second, you will not move to our area without our explicit invitation and agreement. Any attempts to establish residence near us against our wishes will result in a complete cessation of contact. Third, you will not make any financial commitments or legal agreements using our names or credit information. Any future incidents of identity theft or fraud will be reported to law enforcement immediately. Fourth, you will not involve extended family members in disputes between us. Any attempts to manipulate family relationships or create pressure through third parties will be viewed as harassment. Finally, any violation of these boundaries will result in a period of no contact lasting a minimum of 6 months. Repeated violations will result in permanent estrangement. These boundaries are not negotiable. They are not suggestions. They are the terms under which you may remain part of our lives. The choice of whether to accept them is entirely yours. Marcus was quiet after I finished reading. That's pretty harsh, he said finally. It needs to be harsh, I replied. Your mother has spent months manipulating us, lying to us, and committing fraud against us. Gentle suggestions and polite requests haven't worked. I know you're right, he said. It's just hard to write off my relationship with my mother completely. I'm not asking you to write off the relationship. I'm asking you to put it on sustainable terms. Your mother can be part of our lives if she respects our boundaries. If she can't do that, then she's choosing not to be part of our lives. I sealed the letter in an envelope and addressed it to Patricia's home address. I want to give this to her in person at the family meeting, so everyone understands exactly what our position is. The family meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Aunt Linda's house. Marcus and I arrived exactly on time to find most of the Kane family already assembled in the living room. Patricia was sitting in the center of the sofa, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Marcus, Beverley, Aunt Linda greeted us. Thank you for coming. I think we all need to have an honest conversation about how to move forward. I could feel the tension in the room immediately. Patricia's usual supporters seemed subdued, while the family members who had been skeptical of her story looked vindicated by the revelations about fraud and hidden income. Before we begin, I said, pulling the letter from my purse, I want to give this to Patricia. It outlines our boundaries for any future relationship. Patricia took the envelope with shaking hands but didn't open it. I don't need to read this to know that you hate me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't hate you, I replied honestly. But I can't trust you, and I can't allow someone I don't trust to have unlimited access to my child. Uncle Bill cleared his throat. Patricia, we've all seen the evidence about the hidden income and the forged signatures. Can you explain why you felt the need to lie to your own family about your financial situation? Patricia's composed facade finally cracked completely. I was scared, she said, tears streaming down her face. I was scared of being alone, scared of being a burden, scared that Marcus would move on with his life and forget about me. So you decided to manipulate us into taking care of you, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. You decided to solve your problems by making them our problems. I just wanted to be close to my grandchild, Patricia protested. I wanted to be part of her life. No, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. You wanted to control her life. You wanted to insert yourself into our family as an equal partner rather than as a grandmother with appropriate boundaries. Cousin, David spoke up from the corner of the room. Aunt Patricia, you put Marcus's credit at risk with the signature forgery. You could have destroyed his financial future. I thought he wouldn't mind, Patricia said weakly. I thought family was supposed to help each other. Help, yes, Marcus said. But not without permission, not through lies and manipulation. Not by committing crimes in my name. Aunt Linda looked around the room at the assembled family members. I think we need to be honest about something. Patricia, your behavior over the past few months has been unacceptable. The lying, the manipulation, the fraud, that's not how family treats each other. But she's grieving, Cousin Jennifer said, though her voice lacked conviction. She's been struggling since Uncle Robert died. Grief doesn't excuse fraud, I said firmly. Grief doesn't justify identity theft. And grief certainly doesn't give anyone the right to manipulate their children's lives. Patricia opened my letter and read it silently, her tears falling onto the paper. When she finished, she looked up at Marcus with an expression of complete devastation. Is this really what you want? She asked. You want to cut me out of your lives completely? Mom, Marcus said, his own voice thick with emotion. I want you to be part of our lives. But only if you can respect our boundaries and our decisions. Only if you can be honest with us. Only if you can treat Beverly and me as adults who are capable of making our own choices. I don't know how to do that, Patricia admitted. And for the first time in the 6 years I'd known her, she sounded completely honest. Then maybe you need to figure it out, I said. Maybe you need to spend some time learning how to have relationships that aren't based on control and manipulation. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Uncle Bill spoke up. Patricia, I think you should consider getting some counseling. This pattern of behavior isn't healthy for you or for anyone who cares about you. I think we all need some time apart, Marcus said finally. I think Mom needs to work on herself, and Beverly and I need to focus on preparing for her daughter without additional stress and drama. Patricia stood up slowly, clutching my letter in her hand. How long? She asked. How long before I can? See my grandchild? I looked at Marcus, and we had one of those wordless conversations that happen between couples who truly understand each other. 6 months minimum, Marcus said. And only if you've respected our boundaries completely during that time. No phone calls, no surprise visits, no attempts to manipulate other family members into intervening on your behalf. And if I can't do that, Patricia asked, then you'll never meet your granddaughter, I said quietly, because I will not allow someone who can't respect boundaries to have access to my child. Patricia Kane looked around the room at her family, the people who had watched her manipulate and control her son for decades, who had finally seen the truth about her behavior. She clutched my letter to her chest and walked toward the door. I hope you're happy, she said, her voice bitter. I hope you're happy that you've destroyed a family. We didn't destroy anything, Marcus called after her. We just stopped enabling the destruction you were causing. After she left, the room remained silent for a long time. Finally, Aunt Linda spoke. I think you two made the right decision. Patricia needs help, and she's not going to get it as long as people keep making excuses for her behavior. As Marcus and I drove back to our hotel, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months' peace. Not happiness, exactly, because there was nothing happy about the dissolution of family relationships, but peace. The sense that we had finally taken control of our lives and our future. Our daughter would be born into a family where boundaries were respected, where manipulation wasn't tolerated, and where her parents' authority was unquestioned. It was exactly what she deserved. Emma Grace Kane was born on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. 3 weeks before her due date, but perfectly healthy at 6 pounds, 2 ounces. The labor was quick and intense, lasting only 4 hours from the first real contraction to the moment she slipped into the world with a cry that sounded like indignation at being disturbed. Marcus cried when he first held her. I'd never seen him cry like that, deep, shaking sobs of joy and overwhelming love. "She's perfect," he whispered against her tiny head. "She's absolutely perfect." We'd been in our new house for 2 months by then, having finally moved in during my 7th month of pregnancy. The electrical work had been completed, the nursery painted and furnished, and slowly, our displaced life had found its rhythm again. But even as I held my daughter for the first time, even as I marveled at her tiny fingers and the way she seemed to study my face with serious dark eyes, I was aware of who wasn't there. Patricia Kane had respected our boundaries for exactly 3 months before the calls started again. Not to us directly, she was too smart for that, but to Marcus's extended family, asking for updates, begging for news about the pregnancy, promising she'd changed and learned from her mistakes. "She's been calling every week," Aunt Linda had told Marcus during one of their conversations. "She sounds different, more humble. She says she's been going to counseling. Good for her," Marcus had replied. "But that doesn't change our boundaries." The family pressure had been subtle but persistent. Surely we could send a photo when the baby was born. Surely Patricia deserved to know she had a granddaughter. Surely we could find some way to let her be part of the baby's life, but we'd held firm. 6 months of no contact meant 6 months. No exceptions, no early parole for good behavior, no negotiation based on other people's opinions about what Patricia deserved. Now, sitting in the hospital bed with Emma sleeping against my chest, I watched Marcus's phone buzz with texts from family members who'd heard about the birth. Congratulations mixed with subtle pressure messages asking if we were ready to let Patricia know she has a granddaughter now. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked, holding up his phone. "What we said we'd do," I replied. "We maintain the boundaries. We don't make decisions about our daughter based on guilt or family pressure." Dr. Martinez came in to check on us, smiling at the sight of Emma nestled peacefully in my arms. "She's beautiful," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Tired but good," I said, much better than I felt during the pregnancy stress. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. "The difference in your health between then and now is remarkable. You made the right choice prioritizing your well-being." After she left, Marcus and I spent the afternoon learning how to be parents. Emma was an easy baby from the start alert, but calm, nursing well, sleeping in peaceful stretches that let us catch our breath between the overwhelming waves of new parent emotion. My mother arrived that evening with flowers and tears of joy. She held Emma with the careful reverence of someone who understood what a privilege it was to be trusted with a newborn, who recognized that grandparent access was a gift rather than a right. "She's gorgeous," Mom whispered, gently touching Emma's cheek. "She looks like you did as a baby, Bev." The same serious expression, like she's trying to figure out the world. "Do you want to stay the night?" I asked. "Help us navigate the first night home?" "Only if you're sure," Mom replied. "I don't want to intrude on your first days as a family." The contrast between my mother's approach and Patricia's couldn't have been clearer. Mom waited to be invited, asked permission before assuming roles, and recognized that this was our experience to navigate as new parents. We brought Emma home 2 days later to a house filled with flowers from friends and coworkers. But notably, absent of any communication from Patricia, I'd half expected her to violate the no-contact boundary when she learned about the birth. But apparently she was taking our ultimatum seriously. The first weeks of parenthood were a blur of feedings and diapers and the kind of exhaustion that felt like a drug. But they were also filled with moments of perfect clarity. Emma's first real smile, the way she settled immediately when Marcus sang to her, the peace of holding her while she slept. It was during one of those peaceful moments, Emma napping in my arms while I sat in the rocking chair that had belonged to my grandmother, that Marcus brought me an envelope that had been delivered by certified mail. "It's from my mother," he said quietly. I looked at the envelope, noting the formal return, address, and the official delivery method. "Do you want to read it? I think we should read it together." The letter was different from anything Patricia had written before. No manipulation, no guilt trips, no attempts to justify her behavior. Instead, there was a simple, straightforward acknowledgement of what she'd done wrong. "Dear Marcus and Beverley," Marcus read aloud. "I want to begin by taking full responsibility for the pain and stress I caused during your pregnancy and moving process. I manipulated situations to get what I wanted. I lied about my financial situation, and I committed fraud using Marcus's name. None of this was acceptable, and none of it was motivated by love for your family. It was motivated by my own fear and selfishness. I have been attending counseling for the past 4 months, and I am beginning to understand the patterns of control and manipulation that I learned from my own mother and passed on to my relationship with Marcus. This is not an excuse for my behavior, but it is an explanation of why it took me so long to recognize how harmful my actions were. I know that I have no right to ask for forgiveness or for a relationship with your daughter. I understand that trust, once broken as severely as I broke it, may never be repaired. But I want you to know that I am working to become the kind of person who could be a positive presence in a child's life, even if that child is never mine to know. I have moved to a senior living community in my hometown, 1 hour further away from you than I was before. I am living within my means on my actual income, and I am building a life that doesn't depend on controlling other people. I am learning what it means to love someone without trying to own them. If you are ever willing to consider allowing me to meet Emma, I will respect whatever boundaries you set. If you decide that the damage I caused is too great to ever repair, I will respect that decision as well. Please tell Emma, if you ever think it's appropriate, that her grandmother loved her enough to learn how to love better." Patricia, Marcus finished reading and looked at me. "What do you think?" I shifted Emma in my arms, looking down at her peaceful sleeping face. "I think it's a good letter. I think it shows growth and self-awareness. But it's just a letter. The real test is whether she can maintain these insights over time, whether she can respect boundaries when they're inconvenient for her, whether she can love Emma without trying to control her." Marcus nodded slowly. "So what do you want to do?" I thought about the 6 months of peace we'd had, the stress-free pregnancy after we'd established boundaries, the calm environment Emma had been born into. I thought about Jennifer Morrison's advice about protecting our family and Dr. Martinez's warnings about the dangers of chronic stress. But I also thought about Emma and what kind of person I wanted her to grow up to be. Did I want her to learn that people were irredeemable, that mistakes could never be forgiven? Or did I want her to learn that love sometimes meant giving people opportunities to prove they'd changed? "I want to wait," I said finally. "I want to see if she maintains this new approach for the full 6 months we originally agreed on. And then if she does, maybe we consider allowing 1 supervised visit to see if her actions match her words. And if they don't match, then we protect Emma the same way we protected ourselves. We set boundaries and enforce them consistently." Marcus smiled, leaning over to kiss both Emma and me. "I love that our daughter is going to grow up with a mother who's both compassionate and strong." As I sat there in my grandmother's rocking chair, holding my daughter in the house we'd chosen for our family, I felt the deep satisfaction of having fought for something important, and one Emma Grace Kane would grow up in a home where boundaries were respected, where manipulation wasn't tolerated, and where love was expressed through actions rather than words. She would know her parents as people who were capable of both setting limits and offering grace. And if Patricia Kane could truly learn to love without controlling, then maybe someday Emma would know her grandmother too. But that would be Emma's decision to make, when she was old enough to understand the difference between love and possession. For now, it was enough that she was here, healthy and safe, in the family we'd fought so hard to protect. The court order arrived when Emma was 3 months old, during what should have been one of the happiest periods of our lives. We were finally settled in our new home. I was adjusting to motherhood, and Marcus was thriving in his role as a father. Emma was a content baby who slept well and smiled easily, and our little family had found its rhythm. Then the registered mail changed everything. Patricia Kane versus Marcus Kane and Beverley Kane petition for grandparent visitation rights. The official documents declared, despite her letter of apology, despite her promises to respect our boundaries, Patricia had decided to pursue legal action to force access to her daughter. I called Jennifer Morrison immediately. "I thought you said grandparent rights were limited," I said, my voice shaking as I read through the legal filing. "They are," Jennifer assured me, "but that doesn't stop people from filing frivolous petitions." "Let me see the documents." I drove to her office that afternoon with Emma sleeping in her car seat, the legal papers clutched in my free hand like evidence of a crime. Jennifer reviewed them carefully, making notes on her legal pad. "This is exactly what I expected might happen," she said finally. "Your mother-in-law is claiming that she had an established relationship with Emma before you cut off contact, and that continued contact is in the child's best interest." "But she never had a relationship with Emma," I protested. "We maintained the no-contact boundary throughout my pregnancy and after the birth. I know that, and the court will know that too once we present our evidence. But she's claiming that her attendance at the ultrasound appointment and her purchase of baby items constituted the beginning of a grandparent-grandchild relationship. The absurdity would have been laughable if it weren't so threatening. So, buying a dress for a baby she'd never met gives her legal rights? Of course not, but it gives her enough of a basis to file a petition, which means we have to respond and defend your parental rights in court." Jennifer pulled out a thick folder. "The good news is that we've been documenting everything from the beginning. The bankruptcy fraud, the identity theft, the pattern of manipulation, all of that works in our favor. What's the bad news?" "The bad news is that these cases can be expensive and time-consuming, even when they're ultimately unsuccessful. Patricia is essentially using the legal system to continue her harassment of your family." Over the next 6 weeks, Jennifer and I built our defense. We documented Patricia's financial fraud, her violation of boundaries, her emotional manipulation, tactics, and the stress-related medical complications I'd experienced during pregnancy. We gathered statements from family members who had witnessed her behavior, medical records from Dr. Martinez, and evidence of Patricia's lies about her financial situation. Marcus was required to give a deposition, during which Patricia's attorney tried to paint him as an ungrateful son who had been manipulated by his wife into cutting off contact with his loving mother. But Marcus's testimony was clear and unwavering. "My mother spent months lying to us about her financial situation," he stated for the record. "She forged my signature on legal documents, committing identity theft to force her way into our lives. She showed up uninvited to private medical appointments and attempted to insert herself into decisions that should have been made by my wife and me as parents." "But don't you think your daughter would benefit from having a relationship with her grandmother?" Patricia's attorney pressed. "I think my daughter would benefit from having relationships with people who respect boundaries and tell the truth." Marcus replied, "If my mother can demonstrate that she's capable of both, then we might consider allowing supervised visits in the future. But that decision belongs to us parents, not to the court." The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. In May, Patricia arrived with her attorney and several family members who had apparently agreed to testify on her behalf. I sat at our table with Jennifer, holding a folder full of evidence and feeling the familiar sensation of my autonomy being challenged by Patricia's relentless need for control. Judge Rebecca Harrison was a middle-aged woman with a reputation for being tough but fair on family matters. She reviewed the petition and our response with careful attention before calling the hearing to order. "Ms. Kane," she addressed Patricia's attorney, "you're asking this court to override the parental decisions of two fit parents and grant your client visitation rights to a child she has never actually met. That's a significant request that requires significant justification." Patricia's attorney presented their case first. They argued that Patricia had been unfairly denied access to her grandchild, that her interest in the pregnancy and birth constituted the beginning of a relationship, and that Emma would benefit from knowing her paternal grandmother. When it was our turn, Jennifer was methodical and devastating. She presented the evidence of Patricia's fraud, her manipulation, and her complete disregard for our boundaries as parents. She showed the court the forged signatures, the hidden income, and the pattern of lies that had characterized Patricia's behavior throughout my pregnancy. "Your Honor," Jennifer concluded, "this petition isn't about what's best for the child. It's about a woman who can't accept that her adult son has established an independent family with appropriate boundaries. Mrs. Kane is using the legal system to continue a pattern of harassment and control that has already caused significant stress and harm to this family." Judge Harrison asked Patricia to take the witness stand. Under oath, she was forced to acknowledge the bankruptcy fraud, the identity theft, and the lies about her financial situation. "Mrs. Kane," the judge said, her voice stern, "you've admitted to committing fraud against your own son. You've violated multiple boundaries set by the child's parents. You've shown a pattern of manipulation and deception. Why should this court believe that granting you access to this child would be in her best interest?" Patricia's response was exactly what I'd expected: tears, claims of persecution, and attempts to blame me for turning Marcus against her. "I just want to love my granddaughter," she sobbed. "I just want to be part of her life." "Love doesn't require lying, Mrs. Kane," Judge Harrison replied. "Love doesn't require fraud or manipulation or violation of clearly stated boundaries." The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. "This petition is denied. The court finds no compelling evidence that overriding the parents' decisions would serve the child's best interest. Furthermore, the court finds that the petitioner's pattern of deceptive and manipulative behavior toward the child's parents raises serious concerns about her ability to maintain appropriate boundaries in any future relationship with the child." But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. "Mrs. Kane, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting you from contacting the child's parents or appearing at their residence, workplace, or the child's daycare or school. Any future attempts to use the legal system to harass this family will result in sanctions and possible contempt charges." As we left the courthouse, I felt a profound sense of relief mixed with sadness. We had won, but victory in a case like this meant the permanent destruction of family relationships. Emma would grow up without a paternal grandmother, not because we were cruel, but because Patricia Kane had chosen control over love, manipulation over respect. "How do you feel?" Jennifer asked as we stood on the courthouse steps. "Protected," I said, looking down at Emma sleeping peacefully in her stroller, completely unaware of the legal battle that had just been fought over her future. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I feel like our family is truly protected. The restraining order was more than just a legal document. It was validation that our boundaries had been reasonable, our concerns justified, and our decisions as parents respected by the law itself. Patricia Kane had finally faced real consequences for her behavior, and Emma Grace Kane would grow up in a family where boundaries were not just set, but legally protected. 1 year after the court victory, we were finally living the life we dreamed of when we first decided to move. Our little house had become a home, filled with Emma's laughter and the comfortable rhythms of a young family finding its way. Emma. was walking now, toddling around our living room with the determined concentration of a 1-year-old explorer. She had Marcus's dark hair and my stubborn chin, and a personality that seemed to combine the best of both of us, thoughtful but adventurous, serious but quick to smile. The restraining order had worked exactly as intended. Patricia had made no attempts to contact us, and the extended Kane family had gradually stopped pressuring us to reconcile. Some relationships had been strained by our decision to pursue legal protection, but others had grown stronger as family members came to understand the full scope of what we'd been dealing with. I keep thinking about what kind of person Emma's going to be, I told Marcus one evening as we sat on our back porch, watching her play in the sandbox he'd built in our yard. I want her to be someone who can set boundaries but also forgive, someone who can protect herself but still be open to love. She will be, Marcus said confidently. Look at her, she's already so sure of herself, so comfortable in her own space. She's not going to be anyone's victim. It was true. Emma had an innate sense of her own autonomy that I found remarkable in someone so young. When she wanted space, she made it clear. When she wanted affection, she asked for it directly. She was growing up in an environment where her no was respected and her yes was celebrated. My mother had become the kind of grandmother I'd always hoped Emma would have, loving but not possessive, involved but not intrusive. She came for dinner once a week and babysat occasionally when Marcus and I needed date nights, but she never assumed roles that weren't offered or made decisions that weren't hers to make. How do you do it? I'd asked her once. How do you love Emma so much but still respect our boundaries as her parents? Because loving her means wanting what's best for her, Mom had replied. And what's best for her is having parents who feel confident and supported in their role, not undermined or second-guessed. The contrast with Patricia's approach couldn't have been clearer. We'd bought a new house. 6 months after the court case, nothing extravagant, but a place with more space and a better neighborhood school system. The decision to move again had been practical rather than emotional, but it had also felt symbolic. We were building our life on our own terms, making choices based on our family's needs rather than other people's expectations. Marcus had been promoted at work. I'd started a small consulting business that let me work from home while still being present for Emma's daily routines. We were financially stable, emotionally healthy, and genuinely happy in a way that felt both hard-won and deeply satisfying. The only shadow on our contentment was the question of what to tell Emma about her grandmother as she got older. She was too young now to understand family dynamics or wonder why she only had one set of grandparents, but eventually she would ask questions. I think we tell her the truth, Marcus said when I brought up the subject. Age-appropriate truth, but truth. Nonetheless, we tell her that sometimes people make choices that hurt their families, and that we had to protect her and ourselves from someone who couldn't respect boundaries. And if she wants to meet Patricia someday, then we support that decision when she's old enough to make it for herself. But we make sure she understands what happened and why we made the choices we did. I like that answer. Emma would grow up knowing that love and protection sometimes required difficult decisions, but also that people could choose forgiveness and reconciliation when it was safe and appropriate to do so. The photo album on our coffee table told the story of our first year as a family. Emma's first smile, her first steps, her first birthday party surrounded by friends and chosen family. My mother was in many of the pictures, along with Marcus's Uncle Bill and Cousin Jennifer, the family members who had supported our boundaries and earned their place in Emma's life. Patricia Kane was notably absent from these memories, but her absence felt like peace rather than loss. We'd learned to build joy without her drama, to celebrate milestones without her manipulation, to love our child without constantly defending our right to do so. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked one night as we watched Emma sleep in her crib, her small chest rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm of secure childhood. Which part? Any of it. The confrontation, the legal battle, the family division. Do you ever wonder if we should have handled things differently? I thought about the stress-induced pregnancy complications, the financial fraud, the pattern of lies and manipulation that had characterized every interaction with Patricia. I thought about the hotel room crisis, the forged signatures, the court case where we'd had to defend our right to make decisions about our own child. No, I said firmly. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret that we did it. Look at Emma, Marcus. Look at how secure she is, how comfortable in her own space. That's because she's growing up in a family where boundaries are respected and love doesn't come with conditions. I love that about her, Marcus said. She's so sure of herself already, so clear about what she wants and doesn't want. That's what happens when children grow up without manipulation, I said. They learn to trust their own instincts instead of learning to doubt them. As we stood there watching our daughter sleep, I felt the deep satisfaction of having fought for something important and won, not the court case that had just been the legal confirmation of what we already knew. We'd won something much more valuable, the right to raise our child in an environment of respect. Honesty and healthy boundaries. Emma Grace Kane would grow up knowing that she was loved unconditionally, but also that she had the right to set limits on how that love was expressed. She would learn that family relationships should add joy to life, not stress and drama. She would understand that sometimes protecting the people you love requires making difficult choices, and if someday she decided she wanted to know her paternal grandmother, she would do so as a strong, confident young woman who couldn't be manipulated or controlled, because we had given her the gift of growing up in a family where manipulation simply wasn't tolerated. Our little family had emerged from crisis stronger, more united, and more purposeful than ever. We'd learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, it's possession. And we'd created a home where real love could flourish, protected by the strength we'd found in each other and the clarity we'd gained about what truly mattered. Emma stirred in her sleep, and Marcus gently adjusted her blanket. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new milestones, new opportunities to show our daughter what healthy family relationships looked like, and Patricia Kane would have no part in any of it, because we had finally learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's dysfunction, even when that someone is family. 2 years have passed since that day in the courthouse when Judge Harrison validated our decisions and protected our family with a restraining order. As I write this, Emma is 3 years old, and I'm pregnant with our second child, a son who will grow up in the stable, boundaried family environment we fought so hard to create. I keep a journal now, something I started during those dark hotel room days when I needed to document Patricia's manipulation for legal purposes. What began as evidence collection has become a practice of reflection, a way to process the lessons we've learned and the growth we've experienced as a family. Tonight, I'm writing the entry I hope Emma will read someday when she's old enough to understand the choices we made and why we made them. Dear Emma, I write, by the time you read this, you'll probably have questions about your paternal grandmother and why she's not part of our lives. The story is complicated, but the lesson is simple. Love without respect isn't really love at all. Your grandmother Patricia loved your father, but she loved him in a way that required him to be smaller than he was, to need her more than was healthy, to put her emotions above his own family's well-being. When he grew up and chose to build a life with me and you, she couldn't accept that his love for her had to change shape to make room for his love for us. I want you to understand that we didn't cut her out of our lives because we were cruel or unforgiving. We set boundaries because we had to protect something precious, our family, our peace, and your right to grow up without manipulation and drama. You have a grandmother who loves you beautifully and my mother, who shows up when invited, respects our decisions as your parents, and supports our family without trying to control it. That's what healthy family love looks like. Someday, you might want to meet Patricia or have a relationship with her. If that day comes, we'll support your decision, but we'll also make sure you're prepared to protect yourself from the patterns that caused us to make these difficult choices. The most important thing I want you to know is that setting boundaries doesn't make you unloving, it makes you wise. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish, it makes you strong. And choosing people who respect your autonomy over people who demand your compliance is one of the most important skills you'll ever learn. I close the journal and look around our living room, where Emma's toys are scattered across the floor and Marcus is assembling a bookshelf for the nursery we're preparing for our son. This is the life we fought for, ordinary, peaceful, filled with the kind of love that builds up rather than tears down. The Kane extended family has largely moved on from the drama of 2 years ago. Some relationships were casualties of our decision to set boundaries, but others have grown stronger. Uncle Bill visits regularly and has become a wonderful grandfather figure for Emma, cousin. David sends cards on holidays and respects our space. The family members who truly cared about our well-being have found ways to maintain relationships without pressuring us to reconcile with Patricia. We've heard through the family grapevine that Patricia is still in counseling and still living in the senior community near her hometown. She hasn't violated the restraining order or made any attempts to contact us through third parties. Whether this represents genuine change or simply compliance with legal requirements, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. Our job isn't to monitor her progress, but to protect our family's well-being. Marcus is healed from the guilt and confusion that characterized his relationship with his mother for so many years. He's learned to trust his own instincts, to put our family's needs first, and to recognize manipulation when he sees it. He's become the kind of father who will teach our children to value themselves enough to demand respectful treatment from everyone in their lives, including family members. Any regrets? I ask him as he struggles with the bookshelf instructions. About the bookshelf? Yes, I should have paid someone to assemble this thing, he says, making me laugh. About your mother. He sets down the screwdriver and looks at me seriously. I regret that she made the choices she made. I regret that Emma will grow up without a paternal grandmother. But I don't regret protecting our family from her dysfunction. I don't regret choosing you and Emma over her demands for control. What? About the new baby? Any concerns about how we'll handle questions about family as our children get older? I think we'll handle it the same way we've handled everything else, with honesty, appropriate boundaries, and a focus on what's best for our kids rather than what's easiest for the adults. Emma toddles over with a picture book, climbing into my lap with the expectation that story time is available on demand. This is her normal world where her needs are considered, her boundaries are respected, and her parents are united in their love for her and each other. As I read to her about a brave little rabbit who learns to stand up for herself, I think about the woman I was 2 years ago, stressed, confused, and convinced that family peace required me to accept unacceptable behavior. I think about the journey from that hotel room crisis to this peaceful evening, and I marvel at how much we've all grown. The most important lesson I've learned is that protecting your family sometimes requires you to disappoint people you care about. It requires you to choose peace over drama, boundaries over guilt, and your children's well-being over extended family expectations. Patricia Kane taught us something valuable, though not in the way she intended. She taught us that love without respect is manipulation, that family titles don't automatically confer trust, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's dysfunction. Our children will grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally, but also knowing that they have the right to set limits on how that love is expressed. They will learn that healthy relationships require mutual respect, honest communication, and the ability to hear no without retaliating. If Patricia ever truly changes, if she ever learns to love without controlling, then maybe someday there will be room in our lives for a relationship with her. But it will be a relationship on our terms, with our boundaries, focused on what's best for our children rather than what satisfies her needs. For now, it's enough that we've built a family where manipulation isn't tolerated, where boundaries are respected, and where love is expressed through actions rather than demands. Our children will grow up secure in themselves, confident in their worth, and equipped to build their own healthy relationships. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones you have to protect yourself from. Learning that lesson and having the courage to act on it isn't easy, but it's necessary, and it's exactly what Emma and her little brother deserve. Parents who love them enough to fight for their peace, their security, and their right to grow up in a family where love builds up rather than tears down. That's a legacy worth fighting for. That's a story worth telling. And that's the life we've built, one boundary at a time.